and welcome to another Wolftime gaming video. Today I've got the Grandmaster of the Knights Citadel from Scorpion Miniatures. It's an absolutely amazing looking mini. I really can't wait to get some paint on him. Probably going to use him as a captain for my Frostgrave warband that I'm currently in the process of building with a few of the mercenaries from the same company as well. I'll stick a link down in the description below. Go and check them out. Really cool company. Amazing sculpts. Before we get started though, as usual, let's get that kettle on. So I've added a few little rocks on the base just so you've got little basing textures straight off the bat. And the first thing I've done is give it a complete spray of Wraithbone, which is a spray by Games Workshop. So the first step in getting the miniature painted is the face. To start that is the eyes really. So the first thing I've done is get some Corvus black, and all I'm doing is painting from the sort of the bridge of the nose out to the edge of the eye, just to make essentially a black line. The next step is to paint the actual eyeball itself, which is the white part. So I've just got a little bit of white scar, and I'm doing exactly the same thing from the bridge of the eye out to the edge, just making a line within that black area essentially. Try and do this in one motion. You can see I was struggling to actually do it in one motion with the second eye here because it's been a bit of a pain. But essentially what you're then getting is like a dark patch around the eyeball, or like where the eye lids are, and then the white part of the actual eye itself. Next part is the iris, the actual centre of the eye, and I always just do this with black. So again, I've gone with Corvus black, and all I'm doing is just putting a dot where the miniature's looking. So that essentially is the eyes pretty much done. I don't really go into any more detail because on the table they look good. I mean, you don't even need to paint the eyes, let's be honest, when you're going to be looking at these for like 3 feet away while they're on the tabletop. The next part is the skin itself. Now I've gone to the contrast paints again, and I've just used the contrast Gulliman flesh for the skin areas. It's only really around the face with this because he's got gloves on, so it's only the head. He is bald, so I had to go over the back of the head as well. Now you can see that's a little bit patchy, but it's okay. The contrast paints work pretty well. So the next area I'm going to paint is his beard and his hair, and to do that I've again gone to the contrast paints, and I'm using the Black Templar just because it shows the raised areas of the beard or the raised areas of the hair. It shows it up quite light, so it works quite well. I did actually have to put a couple of coats on this though because I wasn't happy initially. The next area I'm going to paint is the black armour. Now on the website, if you go and look at the Scorpion miniatures, you'll see they've actually done a black armour with this, and I absolutely love the look of it. I usually just do everything with lead belcher and then stick some null over the top. I thought this real dark armour that worked quite well, and it really added something to the miniature, so I copied that essentially in this one, and I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm painting all those metal armours with Black Templar contrast paint, so it's not complete matte black, it's got that lighter areas as it thins out on the plates, and it looks quite effective, or at least I think it does. You'll see once we've actually finished painting the miniature. Just take your time around this. I know Games Workshop say 2 thick coats with these, or 1 thick coat rather than 2 thin coats, but I really like to go on thinly with these paints, even though they're contrast paints, purely because you don't want to overload it, because you really do get quite a lot of pooling, because it is quite thin paint really. Just a really quick piece of advice as well when using contrast paints is make sure you do go over the areas afterwards and make sure your other paint's covered completely, because you do get occasional spots where the paint pulls away. Moving on from the black, the next colour I used was Contrast Wildwood. Now I used this over the fur areas initially. It's got like probably a wolf, I would say, around his shoulders, which I did think about going for like a grey initially, but because of going with the black armour, I wanted it to stand out a little bit more. I didn't want it to all blend in, so I went with this brown sort of a colour. And Wildwood's a great mid-brown to use. You can see the amount of detail on the back is perfect for using these contrast paints as well, because all of those raised areas almost go like a tan sort of a colour. So it saves any sort of highlighting that you need to do after, which is great because you can get your miniature painted much quicker than using normal paints, or at least I think so. Obviously, if you're wanting to go into loads of detail and have them looking really good, then yes, go into the normal sort of paints. But to get it on the tabletop, this is quite an easy one to use. I also used it on the scabbard as well, so it's a great sort of brown, leathery sort of brown paint as well. So I used it all around the scabbard because I thought that was an ideal place to use it. And also on he's got a knife on his right hand side as well. I did exactly the same thing that I did with the sword as well. The next colour I've used is Contrast Skeleton Horde. Now I've used this to do the leather areas, essentially all the belts and things like that, because I wanted them to look different to the Wildwood. I hadn't got any other contrast paints for brown, so I've gone with the Skeleton Horde. And I did just put a couple of coats on to darken it down lightly, but I think it looks really good because it makes the leather look a lot older. I did his glove as well on his right hand. You can't see the glove on the left hand, but I did the glove on the right as well. Next paint I moved on to was a red paint, again another contrast paint, and this time it was Blood Angels Red, and I've used this on the background of the shield. It's something I've not really tried before, is using it on shields and things. I know you can, I've coloured shields in the past, but in this instance I would have gone maybe with a silver or a brown or something similar, but I thought why not go with the red, because red is one of the main colours for the theme of the force. I wanted to go with like a red and a white, or red and cream. So I thought this was an ideal colour to actually go on the shield as the background as well, especially with like the fleur-de-lis style feathers that are on the shield as well, so that looked quite good. I also did the cape, you can see, in exactly the same colour, and that one went on really well. Next painter is the lead belcher. It's my sort of go-to when we come to any sort of silver painting. Anything that's silver that I paint is pretty much lead belcher with null over the top. I think it looks really good. It really darkens it down really well with the null afterwards as well, and it goes on really well. So I've essentially painted all the metal areas, so that you've got belt buckles, a little bit of chainmail sort of stuff over the top of his thighs, the swords, the hilt of the sword as well. I initially painted silver, and there's the bottom area of the sword as well. So essentially everything went with that lead belcher colour. I think I let out a little bit of Screamer Pink, which is not a paint I use very often, but I tend to use it for all sort of handles and things for weapons. I've done a lot, used it a lot in the past with the 40k stuff I've been painting. I thought why not bring it out, actually paint these with the same sort of colour, because I don't use it very often when it comes to medieval miniatures, and I wanted it to stand out and look different to the red mainly. I didn't want to just use a more Blood Angels red, so that's why I went with the Screamer Pink. I did just pull out the red again just to do the knee. You can see on the left knee there, and the right knee's got like sort of a metal areas. I can't remember what they're called, for just protecting the knee plates. And I've done these essentially half red and left half as the Wraithbone base coat. And I think that looks really good because you've got that red and sort of cream or off-white colour. I got the Skeleton Horde out again just to do that centre area. I wasn't sure how I was going to paint this initially, and I was thinking about going for another brown, but which is why I left it at the time of doing the belts and things. I thought why not just do that area as well. It works quite well. It's a nice colour, and it drops in quite nicely, especially using the contrast as well. Saves any sort of highlighting. And I wanted quite a quick paint scheme with this. I then got out the gold paint that I've got, which is Retributor armour. I had this for quite a while because of painting custodes in the past. It's a really bright gold, very sort of shiny in comparison to a lot of others, but I thought it works quite well. And because I was going to be using null on the silver areas anyway, it was ideal to actually get this on there, and that would darken it down after. There's also sort of like a tree sort of effect just on the front of his armour as well that I painted the same, and I just picked out some of the details on the weapons as well. Just going around the edge of the armour, I did want to highlight it because I thought it was a little bit too dark, so I went round with Administratum Grey and just picked out all the edging just around the armour, anywhere where the sort of light would catch, really, the tops and any sharp edges, just to really bring that highlight up nicely and make it look a little bit different. I also did the beard at that point as well, exactly the same colour, just to pick out some of the raised areas, because he was looking a lot younger than I wanted him to. I wanted him to look quite old. At this point, I then moved on to the null oil, and as you can see, I just coated the weapon completely. I did the whole of the armour because I wanted it to all blend together, especially around the chest plate with the gold. It did stand out a little bit too much. And I also did over the tops of that wraith bone on the kneecaps, and like the feathers on the shield as well. I left them as the base coat and just put null oil on, and it worked really, really well and looked actually quite effective. I then broke out the Black Templar contrast paint again, sorry, for the basing, and just did the rocks in that to make them quite dark. I wanted them to look like really, really dark. I didn't want to just go with a matte black because I wanted it to be a little bit lazy as well. And then use Rhinox hide on the rest of the base. Now you can use, a lot of people go buy pre-mixed basing materials and you can just throw this on afterwards, but I don't really like to do that. I've got a lot of fine sand and grit and things that I've had from previous projects in the past, and essentially I use that for a lot of the basing there, so I always paint it. And I tend to stick with Rhinox hide for the main brown base coat, because I think it gives a really dark mud sort of a colour. You can then highlight that with any sort of lighter browns that you've got. I've used actually a really light touch of Mournfang brown on this. I mean, if I went too heavy with Mournfang, it'd look completely different, but really light dry brush of Mournfang just over the top of the soil does just pick out little bits and pieces on there as well. I've then gone around the base with Corvus Black, and it's a really thin paint. This black paint is. You do need to do this a few times, so I think I went over this 3 times to actually get a decent coat on the base. I need to try and get myself some Abaddon Blackers again, so it's a lot easier just to get that on there. So then on to actual basing materials. Now I did say I was going to use this for Frostgrave, but a lot of the mats and the terrain and the miniatures I've already got are painted. I've got lots of grass and things like that on, so it's almost like a thawed Frostgrave that we play in the house. So I've gone with some bits of flock, a little bit of static grass and things like that, just to make it look a little bit more green. And there you go, that's the actual finished miniature himself. I'm really pleased with him. I think he looks absolutely amazing. You can see a lot of this is down to the sculpt, because I did a really quick paint scheme on him, flew over the top of this miniature, and he looks pretty good. And you stick him on the table and stand upright, he looks absolutely fantastic. Probably not going to win any competitions, but for a really quick paint scheme, I think he works, and I think he's going to look great as the captain of my Frostgrave warband that's going to take on some of my son's bits and pieces. But thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to see any more videos. I've got loads and loads of videos coming up. Check out the other videos on the channel as well. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.